Now we are going to discuss what is function in Kotlin programming. So for that I'm going to create a package and the package name is functions. In this functions I'm going to create a file and the file name is functions. So first let's use here main function. Now in this I'm going to create a variable and the variable name is a and type of this thing is integer. That's why I'm using 2 value. In this variable a we have variable b and I want to initialize this variable b with 4 and I want to calculate its sum. So for that we use a few operators. We are having here a plus, so plus is an operator. You can use here a plus b and store this information into a variable c. And lastly just simply print this c. Now logically this c will have value of 6 because 2 plus 4 is equivalent to 6 and when you execute it you will get it. Okay, now let's say I want to reuse this logic again and again. So to do that we'll create function that is used to calculate this thing a plus b and return me the result of that calculation. So for that we are going to create a function that we can reuse. So in order to create a function we first use fun keyword. Next we are going to define my function name. So let's say I will call this sum of two numbers. Next we have a return type. As I said to you, I'm gonna create a function that is actually use these two values and return me the integer type that contains the information about a plus b. So as you can see we have function, name of my function is sum of two numbers, and we have return type. Basically we are expecting from this function that in future it will return me integer type value. Now because I want to calculate sum, so in order to calculate sum we require two numbers. So we have to pass these two things in a form of parameter or argument to our function so that it can use those arguments to calculate or perform this operation. So we can use here a type of this thing is integer, then we have b argument, type of this thing is integer. So now we are able to pass these two values in our function in a form of a and b. Lastly we are going to write a logic that is used to calculate the sum of these two numbers. So for that as you can see we have a, we have b, simply use here a plus b and that's it. This is our logic that is used to calculate the sum of two numbers. But the problem is our function is expecting integer type value. Basically we have to return something in a form of integer so that the error will be gone, that you can see over here. So for that we use a return keyword. Now this return keyword is actually used to return a specific result from your function. So now it's time to use it. So to use this thing we use here sum of two numbers, and in this sum of two numbers we are going to pass our a and our b. So what it will do, it will take these numbers in a form of argument and write a logic. So this is my logic a plus b. So once it calculates the sum, because we are using a return keyword, it simply return the final result after the calculation. And as you can see the return type of this function is integer. That means it will return integer type. C is a type of integer that is actually used to store the sum of these two numbers. Now when you execute this main function, as you can see we are able to see here 6, which is a sum of a plus b. One more thing, it is not like that you are going to use the same name that your variable has. You can actually use here first number, and in place of b you can also use second number. Now you can write logic for this, first number plus second number, and it works. And one more thing, you can also use here first number to mention that this is the first number value. We have here second number value. So this is actually used when you don't want to pass your variable in sequence. So let's say I want to revert this thing and I want to pass my second number first and first number second. So because we are saying to our function that this first number is equivalent to A, second number is equivalent to B, we have no problem. So when you execute it, it will be the same. Now I'm going to show you how you can create a function which will take unlimited number of argument and return you the result. So for that, I'm going to create a function and the function name is sum of numbers. Because I want to pass here unlimited number of argument, we'll use here var arg, and you can define the name of this var arg, and for my case I'm using here numbers, and type of this thing is integer. It will simply calculate sum of those numbers and return in a form of integer. So use your numbers, and I'm using here sum. So sum is a function which is provided by Kotlin that is used to calculate sum of a lot of numbers, basically more than one numbers. So I'm using this thing and return it. Now let's use sum of number. Remove this sum of two numbers and use here sum of numbers. Because it has variable argument, you can pass here A, then B, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, then 7. Basically you can pass unlimited argument in here. Now when I execute, you can see here 6. Now let's say I want to pass here 10. So logically it gives us 16. As you can see 16. So by using this approach, you can pass unlimited argument and make sure the type of those argument is homogeneous, I mean the same. Now I'm going to show you how you can use higher order function. So the main difference between higher order function is, in higher order function we will pass function as an argument. I think it's a very complex thing for you to understand. So let me create here a function of higher order, and through that I will explain you. So I'm using here a function and the function name is higher order sum. Okay, and in this I want to pass A and B because it is a higher order function. So in higher order function, in our argument we pass function. So basically higher order sum will contain an argument, and that argument is nothing but a new function. So let's see how we can pass it. I'm going to call this operation. So this is my function name, and as you can see in function we have arguments. As you can see we have these arguments and the return type. So here you have to mention it. So first argument type is integer. Second argument type is integer within a small bracket, and the return type. So if you want to point out the return type, you should use your arrow, I mean the dash and the arrow. So return type of this thing is integer. Cool. Now instead of writing our own logic just like we did for this sum of two numbers, this time I want to use operation function to calculate A plus B sum. So for that I'm using here operation, and as you can see if you want to call a function we'll use here small brackets. Similarly, because this will represent a function, I can use the same thing. So I'm using here operation and these small brackets. In this you can pass A plus B, and that's it. Because our operation function contains two arguments and eventually it returns integer type. Now let's see how we can use this higher order sum. So use higher order sum, pass your A and B. Lastly, we have here operation. So use pair of parentheses. Now you are going to define its body, right? Because up to this point you are only define its input type and its return type, but you haven't defined the logic that is actually used to perform the calculation. So that logic will be defined in this pair of parentheses, because logic will be defined within our function body, and this pair of parentheses will represent body for this function. We have A comma B. So because we are having two different argument, that's why I'm using here a. So a represent the first integer, b represent the second integer. Now write your logic. So a plus b. Now this operation function will return you a plus b, basically the sum of these two. But we want to return this value or the calculation to my higher order sum. So for that, first just use here integer. Now this integer will eventually become the return type of higher order sum. Because operation is already returning integer type, use here return keyword, and that's it. Now simply execute your function. As you can see, we are able to see here 6. So let's recapitulate what we did over here. So we are creating a higher order sum function, and in this higher order sum function we have to pass function as an argument. So we have two values, a and b. So a and b will eventually contain the values that we want to calculate the sum of. Next we have argument, and this is not a normal argument, it's a function. So this function has two input, int, and the return type of our higher order sum is integer. Now I'm using this operation. So this operation will eventually contain the logic to perform a plus b summation, and return type of this function is integer. That's why this operation ab will return integer, and that integer we are returning to our higher order sum. As you can see, its return type is integer, that's why. Now what will happen in here? Higher order sum, we pass a plus b, so a plus b goes into this function and pass this a plus b value to our operation, and the operation body will define over here. So logic behind this is a plus b, that's it. So a plus b eventually return the sum of a plus b, which is equivalent to 6. This is a operation function which is actually used to perform the calculation of a plus b. It will return the calculated value, and once we receive the calculated value, we'll return it, and eventually we are getting the 6, which is a sum of a plus b, and this 6 stored in c variable, and c variable we are printing out over here, and we are getting 6, as you can see over here. So this is a higher order function. We have few built-in function that is used to perform these normal operations. So instead of using here a plus b, you can also use here a plus b, and it will do the same thing. Similarly, we have a minus b, so it will simply subtract it. Simply we have here times, so this is actually used for the multiplication. Then we have divide, so this is used for division purposes. So this function is eventually coming up from Kotlin. You can use these functions too if you want to, but for learning purposes I don't think so this is a good approach to see. So that's all for functions.